I'm Carolyn Holstein, a member of the Sunday Services Committee. Woohoo! Your lay leader today. Welcome, old friends and new, in the Zoom and in the sanctuary. You're an essential part of our celebration today. We're all growing, all learning, all loved. Just as you are, you're welcome here today. A happy May Day, everyone, not Mother's Day, May Day. Life is a gift for which we are all grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. Carol's going to light the chalice for you, and we invite you to light a chalice, candle, or lamp where you are at home too.
Everyone who can get a string. Now let's have two circles, okay? One on the outside if you have, and one, once you guys get in the circle, make a circle, okay? Here you go, come on. There we go, come on. So this is a maypole. You know why it's called a maypole? You know what month it is now? It's May. And long ago, people would dance around this maypole. Somewhat fancier, sometimes a real tree. And what would happen, other than mass confusion, is that they'd end up with a beautiful pole, people going around it. It's really can be a beautiful dance, and this pole ends up being a weaving of all the different ribbons. And all the kids would do it, and a lot of adults would do it too. And so guess what happened because people were having so much fun? What do you think happened? Any idea? What happened is the old people said, no, you can't do it, it's too much fun. That happened in England, and then it happened here in Massachusetts until nicer people came to be in control, and they said it was okay to have a maypole. So let's try this, okay? You guys, you want to lift it up a little bit, and you guys, can you come in a circle, and we'll see how our maypole comes out. Okay? Hang on one second. I even have for you. Okay, well, our beautiful maypole music is not here, but let's just try it. Ready? Let's go. You guys go this way, and you guys go this way. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go! Go, 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 go. You guys go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. Go, 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 go. Go. Oh, we're doing great. Go under. You're doing great. Oh. Oh.
His legal work has included the successful representation with his co-counsel of the mother of the first lesbian or gay custody case to go before any state's highest court. He's also represented a man on death row in Georgia and of a Guantanamo detainee. Although Bill isn't going to speak this morning as a representative of any organization, he has been as well for some 35 years the director of the Western Mass Office of the American Civil Liberties Union of Massachusetts, where his recent, that's the ACLU, if you didn't know, where his recent works include litigation on behalf of farm workers and advocacy for the Farmers of Freedom of Farmers Act. As well, this is interesting, protecting the free speech rights of condominium owners in Amherst and Belchertown to post their Black Lives Matter signs. In addition to his legal work, Bill is a writer and voice of the podcast, The Civil Liberties Minutes. He has a monthly column in the Daily Hampshire Gazette, and as well as the author of 2 collections of his writings. They're called Where the War Comes Home and Life on the Co-op Plan. Bill will speak this morning about Ukraine, war crimes, and the law of war. Thank you, Bill, and welcome to the UUSA.
It was a great pleasure to speak with the congregation last July 4th, and the previous July 4th. I haven't been in the sanctuary. It's a great pleasure. Can you hear me okay? Great pleasure to be here in the sanctuary with you this morning. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I do speak this morning as a private citizen, but as someone who cares passionately about civil liberties and the rule of law and peace. So, May Day is an odd amalgam of very solemn commemorations and festivities and frivolity. Let's start with the latter, okay? So, dancing around the maypole, and I apologize for the lack of coherent instructions for the kids. Definitely have to work on that dance instructor thing. But the May 1st ritual, the maypole dance, is actually something that goes back perhaps thousands of years. It often involves a pole or a tree trunk or a living tree, flowers and ribbons, and it's a celebration of rebirth. It's a celebration of Earth, and the festivities celebrate that rebirth of Earth. And as I mentioned to the kids, in fact, because of the festivities, maypole dancing was outlawed in England in the 17th century. And never wanting to let a bad idea die, the Puritans in Massachusetts also met the maypole dance with opprobrium and outlawed it. So, maypole dancing is only one of the celebrations of May 1st. And in the United States, there are many official and unofficial celebrations on May 1st. So, May 1st, like many dates in our calendars, is celebrated by various groups and organizations. For example, May 1st, I bet you didn't know this, is Mother Goose Day. And it's National Chocolate Parfait Day. And on the first Sunday of the month, when May 1st falls on the first Sunday of the month, as it does this year, it is also National Lemonade Day. So, one other thing. This may have escaped your attention as well. May 1st is the first day of May, of course, which happens to be National Steel Mark Month. Okay, of the contributions you of a certain age might attribute to Lyndon Johnson, National Steel Mark Month, a day set aside so the people of the United States can reflect upon the importance of steel in our national life. A steel mark is the mark on steel. I'm not making this up. Really, it's Title 36, Section 139 of the United States Code. Now, May Day, of course, celebrates and commemorates serious matters, including, and importantly, May 1st as International Workers' Day, a day that came about in 1889 as international groups designated the day in support of and commemoration of the deaths at Haymarket Square 3 years earlier in 1886. This relationship between workers, socialism, and activism did not sit well with President Grover Cleveland. And so, what Grover Cleveland did was designate a new day, a different day, as Labor Day in the United States. Hence, the first Monday in September is our Labor Day. Now, that was not enough to eradicate the idea of May 1st as International Workers' Day, and so President Eisenhower designated May 1st as Loyalty Day. Now, Loyalty Day is exactly what it sounds. Loyalty Day was first observed in 1921, and it was called Americanization Day. In 1955, Congress passed a resolution making it an official day. In 1958, a law, Loyalty Day, became Loyalty Day, and that was not enough. So, May 1st, as you probably know, this is better known, also is Law Day. Law Day received its official status, again, from Dwight Eisenhower as president. Came about through a presidential proclamation in 1958, codified by Congress in 1961. So, to each and every one of you, happy Law Day. Now, in case May 1st leaves you with a hankering for more days, we'll note that May 2nd is National Life Insurance Day, and this coming week we'll also celebrate National Textile Day and National Two-Colored Sock Day. Oh, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. It's National Two-Colored Shoe Day. That's so when someone comes up and says you're wearing two-colored shoes, you're allowed to say, yes, I have another pair exactly like it at home. Now, more seriously, President Eisenhower recognized on the first day the rationale for Law Day, which was, of course, to offset the celebration of May Day in socialist and communist countries. He said this, "In a very real sense, the world no longer has a choice between force and law. If civilization is to survive, it must choose the rule of law." War, of course, is in many ways the ultimate lawlessness, the embodiment of the failure of the rule of law, of negotiations, a failure to abide by the principles of the United Nations. War, with its threat and reality of death, is so omnipresent and arbitrary. There is this extraordinary irony to the fact, and it is a fact, that there are laws that govern war. It's that legal structure and the strictures of war I'd like us to explore today. Now, my personal experience with the law of war is limited. I did represent a Guantanamo detainee, along with Buzz Eisenberg, Ashfield attorney, resulted in the repatriation of that young man, a 17-year-old boy, early on in the process. It led to a number of questions that I did not know the answer to, that I had not thought about until that representation, which included these questions. What was our client's status? Was he an enemy combatant, or was he a civilian? And who was going to figure that out? And how long could he be held until that was figured out? And if the international law really is that an individual who is a combatant can be held until the end of the conflict, and according to President Bush and Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, the war was the war on terrorism. The war on terrorism could go on forever. The battlefield of the war was everywhere and anywhere, and therefore, according to the administration, these men could be held indefinitely in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, at the prison, because the war was still going on. So, this indefinite detention, this result of arguments about the rule of law, ended up so twisted that the United States government was taking the position, and still to some degree takes the position, that people can be imprisoned indefinitely and never be charged with a crime. There is irony here. It's irony on steroids, I would believe. And many of these questions still do not have clear answers, notwithstanding that the issues came before the United States Supreme Court twice, in 2004 and 2006. Since 2002, 779 men and boys have been held in Guantanamo at the United States prison, the naval facility. 39 men remain there today. Of the 39, 27 have never had any charges proffered against them. Let's turn to Ukraine. Historically speaking, today's laws, most of today's laws governing war and hoping to prevent war, in a formal international sense, began with the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations in 1945. Before then, of course, there were other laws. There's the Hague Convention, many people have heard of 1899, 1907. There was a Geneva Convention, similar to the Geneva Conventions we talk about, in 1864. But most of the law that we have really stems from the UN Charter in 1945, and the 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949. Prior to that, most international law was treaties between individual countries. Now, there was one other thing that I learned in my representation, discussed by the Supreme Court in the cases I mentioned, Hamdi and Hamdan, and that is something I had never thought about before, which is an international common law of war. Common law in our Anglo-American tradition of law is judge-made law, law based on previous decisions. It's not statutory, it's not constitutional. Judge makes this decision and then the next judge builds on that, the next decision, and that is the common law. There has been, there still is, a common law of war, because war is so prevalent, so part of our history, so part of our present, that law just keeps developing because war is so omnipresent. Now, treaties can change or supersede common law, and that brings us to the United Nations Charter, which conceptually is a treaty among nations. The treaty is, in essence, a solemn contract. Treaties, of course, are mentioned in the United States Constitution. There are 193 member states of the United Nations. All have agreed to abide by its charter. I want to share with you a couple of relevant sections of the United Nations Charter. Let's start with this. All members, the member states, nations who are members of the United Nations, shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Unless Vladimir Putin didn't hear that, let me try it again. All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. There's another section in the Charter of the United Nations that we should, of course, reflect on today. It's this provision. And again, it incorporates the common law of war. It says, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. In other words, the United Nations envision that if there are war, you can defend yourself, the country can defend itself, and then the United Nations, the Security Council would take appropriate action to solve the conflict. Of course, we did not necessarily envision that the 5 members of the Security Council would never really work together again after this was, and that Russia, of course, has veto power as a permanent member of the Security Council. Now, self-defense. What is meant by self-defense sounds pretty self-evident, right? It's not. So, there is a concept that America has promoted, the United States has promoted, which is called preemptive self-defense. So, it's not irrational. There's going to be a terrorist attack. The United Nations and the United States knows there's going to be a terrorist attack. Do you actually have to wait to be attacked, or can you engage in preemptive self-defense somewhere else that might look like otherwise an act of war? So, we have so far touched on what's called the war of aggression, the right to self-defense, to preemptive self-defense. We should know the humanitarian exception, which is the nation may invade another nation to save people for an overwhelming, clear humanitarian purpose. I don't think that applies here. Now, the clearest war crime is the crime of instigating a war of aggression. Russia has done that. So should Putin ever be charged with a war crime, and in a minute I'll get to why that is so extremely unlikely, the charge that would stick the easiest is the war of aggression. And the International Court at The Hague has jurisdiction to try the crime of aggression. There are other types of crimes that are sometimes referred to as crimes of war, for which the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction. One is genocide. Genocide is defined as acts aimed at destroying a racial, religious, ethnic, or national group. The Holocaust was genocide. And it is defined and jurisdiction given to the International Court in the Geneva Conventions and according to other treaties as well. The second crimes that we often talk about as crimes of war are crimes against humanity. Now, crimes against humanity actually is not codified, but it is part of that common law of war. And it's defined in the rules of the court as widespread or systemic attacks directed against a civilian population. Those acts include murder, enslavement, rape, and other sexual abuses, starvation, torture, abduction, forcible displacement as part of that systemic attack. Conceptually, of course, genocide and crimes against humanity can share, and often do share, a significant similar factual basis. It may be helpful to think of genocide as acts directed against destroying a group, and crimes against humanity as being directed as individuals and civilians. So, 1/2 minute on the Geneva Conventions. It is the fourth Geneva Convention and the Geneva Conventions set forth rules about the proper treatment of prisoners of war and sick and wounded soldiers and sick and wounded and shipwrecked sailors. The fourth convention protects civilians from inhumane treatment. It prohibits attacks on civilian hospitals and ambulances. It protects the populace from mistreatment by occupiers, and it is a violation of those laws of war in the Ukraine that justifiably has so outraged the world. But could any of these crimes actually be proved? Well, there's plenty of evidence. It is sad, it is horrifying, it brings tears to my eyes, and I'm sure yours every night when I see the images on television. The mass graves, the razed villages, the intercepted communications between Russian commanders, the bombing of hospitals and schools, the killing of children, the execution of civilians. These are war crimes. And the evidence exists. They're not so clear, and these are semantics that lawyers will figure out long after this conflict is over, perhaps. But whether this is genocide is a different question. Genocide requires proof that the atrocities were committed with the specific intent to destroy a particular group. And proving that against Putin or the upper echelons of the Russian military, that would be difficult. We're talking about proving what in traditional criminal law terms is mens rea, that is the mental element. And that wouldn't be simple. After all, who's going to testify that Vladimir Putin's intent was to commit atrocities and annihilate people rather than to annex Ukraine and make it part of Russia? They would claim that the atrocities are incidental and not part of Putin's plan, and in any event, of course, that they never happened at all, contrary to everything we can see. So it's mid-level commanders who are likely, if anyone will ever be charged, to actually face a court of justice. There are other obstacles. First, at the International Court, the person's presence is required. And who is going to make these individuals show up? The International Court has no authority to capture. It has no police force. It can't force someone to appear before it. So unless Russia agreed to extradite Putin, for example, he's not going to appear at the International Court, even if they bring charges. There's another problem. The court's authority to prosecute persons ratified in, it's called the Rome Statute, don't worry about it. Those are the countries that have agreed to the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. Russia is not one of the signatories. Neither is the United States, by the way, but so it goes. Now, Ukraine isn't either, but before the war ever started, some time ago, Ukraine did grant the court jurisdiction to prosecute war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Now, as I said, prosecuting the crime of aggression would be the easiest crime against Russia, but to prosecute it at the International Court would then require Russia's consent. Can we agree that's not going to happen? There is one other possibility, and I think this speaks to the humanity, our shared humanity. It's a legal theory that is not without its complexities and difficulties. But it is, I think, worthy of our consideration because it speaks to our common humanity. And that is the concept of universal jurisdiction. Universal jurisdiction is the legal doctrine that every country, any country, has jurisdiction to try truly horrifying crimes, international crimes. They constitute crimes of war, crimes against humanity, and genocide, and they can be tried in that country according to the rules, the normal rules of procedure and law in that country. Any country. Universal jurisdiction, by way of example, is the theory that Israel utilized in bringing Adolf Eichmann there for trial, for his participation in the genocide, his participation in the crimes against humanity, his participation in implementing Hitler's plan to exterminate all Jews. Universal jurisdiction is a way in which Russian leaders, at least in theory, again, you have this issue of how you would ever make the person appear, could be held to account. It is true as well that Ukraine in theory and perhaps in practice could try some Russians after the war. Ukraine's prosecutor general recently noted more than 6,400 crimes of aggression and war crimes since Russia's invasion. It's a beautiful day. I'm being really depressing. I apologize. But there's a reality here. And the reality is we are living in a really difficult and very dangerous time. And I don't stand here this morning with answers. And I hope that this perhaps cursory overview of the international law of war is not unduly depressing or that in any way interferes with activism or hope or joy. I don't stand here with answers. I stand here with, as I think many of us do, with many questions. And also with the hope that humankind will find a way for this to result in a place of peace. It's not an impossible dream. It's been dreamt many times. And I would like to conclude by sharing one of those times of peace that is actually at the core of international law and international law on war. And that is, as I've mentioned, the Charter of the United Nations. I don't think many of us often read it, so I'd like to share it with you. Here's how the Charter of the United Nations begins. We, the people of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, and the equal right of men and women and of nations, large and small. And to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, and to promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. And for these ends, and to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, and to unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, and to ensure the acceptance of principles in the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used, save in the common interest. It's the humanitarian exception. And to employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples. We, the people, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Accordingly, our respective governments, through representatives assembled in the city of San Francisco, do hereby establish an organization to be known as the United Nations. Hope for peace. It is our common prayer. It is what unites us as people. It is not self-actualizing, as these treaties and international law are not self-effectuating. It is up to us to find the way. It is up to us to search for the answers, not because they are easy or obvious, but because they are hard and difficult, and because our common humanity depends on our success in that very difficult, perhaps endless endeavor, but the one to which I would suggest we must and always must put our best efforts, put our biggest faith in humanity, and bring us together as people of the United Nations.
Louise and Carolyn and I will sing. This is my song, which is hymn number 159. If you're here, would you sing along silently? And if you're at home, sing out loudly. Thank you.
It's time to extinguish our chalice now. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts, until we are together again. Our closing words: take courage, friends. The way is often hard. The pain is never clear. The path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down, there's another truth. You are not alone.